As darkness falls across Cornwall, tales of ghosts and ghouls emerge from all quarters. The land is steeped in haunted tales of ghostly carriages and murdered sailors. In one such corner of Bodmin Moor lies the notorious Jamaica Inn, built as a coaching inn in 1750. Adam is here today as he has an interest in all things paranormal and has read all about the inn's haunted history. What will he uncover as the day turns to night, and will he be able to find the facts behind these alleged hauntings? So turn down the lights and join us.
Jamaica Inn, what an amazing location. The building's full of history and haunted history as well. I'm hoping to experience and hear some really fascinating stories.
The Jamaica Inn, oh, that's world famous. Dates back to 18th century. It was an old coaching inn. It's linked to smugglers, Daphne du Maurier, and more recently, obviously, the hauntings.
Okay, Karine, thank you very much for coming along to the show and doing an interview for us. So my first question is the obvious question. What made you get into ghost hunting?
Well, like most people, I enjoyed reading ghost stories under the bed covers, and when I hit my 30s, I was lucky enough to be a tenant of a pub that was over 300 years old, and it was very haunted. So the first 6 months I was scared, and then you get used to having this invisible flatmate who doesn't like certain doors shut, would throw your keys if you had a hangover, and things like that. But you get used to it, and I don't believe that ghosts are horrible if it's real, and I don't believe they can hurt you.
As a child, we had some books called Man, Myth and Magic. It was a collector's set. Now, it covered pretty much everything. Your ghosts, UFOs, poltergeists, demons, and even up to the horror films with Christopher Lee with the red eyes as Count Dracula. So there's a lot of historical stories in there. Now, later on in life, I had my own experiences, probably from around the age of 16, 17. But I thought, rather than take it for granted that I've experienced something, why? Why have I experienced it? So that's the questions I've been asking over the years. Now, each time I experience something, I look into why I've experienced it and do my best to rationalise what's actually happened.
What is a ghost? We don't really know if it's our loved ones or people that are dead. We presume it is, but like anything, paranormal is the unknown, and who knows, we really won't know the answer until we die ourselves. So the first reported haunting was in 1911 of a man dressed in strange clothing sat outside the wall of the front of the Jamaica Inn. When locals approached him and tried and talk, he ignored them and simply disappeared. But we were lucky enough to speak to a young lady who was a child in 1977, was sat in the back of her parents' car parked in the roads outside the inn, and she said, "Mummy, Daddy, who's that man dressed in strange clothing? Everyone's ignoring him." So it makes me wonder whether there are continuous reports, but we're not being told them. So then we go to the 1950s, where, funny enough, the paranormal reports are totally different to today. The landlady at the time, Mrs. Gross, would say that Jamaica Inn was a lovely place daytime. Soon as night fell, the atmosphere changed, and guests would come down and demand to know who had been in their room, and folded up their clothes and put them neatly at the end of the bed. But that was also the first sighting of the man with a tricorn hat and a green cape walking through the main bar and the lounge of the Jamaica Inn, much to the startled expression of the staff, because the place was shut for a private event. So this corridor leading from reception to some of the modern rooms, this originally would have been a cow shed leading to barns, because the Jamaica Inn was a working farm for over 110 years. The man in the green cape was first reported walking down this corridor many, many years ago. So we're now in the Smuggling Museum. This originally would have been a barn to the original dwelling house before it became the Jamaica Inn. So interestingly, why is it haunted? So 7 years ago, I was sat at the other end with a colleague, and underneath here we saw a pair of little feet walking past and then disappearing. So years ago, this used to be toilets, and exactly behind me, a big shadow man has been reported for many, many years. We used to think it was a blacksmith. We didn't know then the actual smithy is the white building across the road, and you'll see later where one of the bellows are in the upper restaurant. Now this huge man, we have a description. He has a beard, strawberry blonde beard, strawberry blonde hair, and the most common name is James, and we seem to think it may be James Broad, the son of the first owner here.
Wow. Does the spirit, does the shadow, does he try and interact with people, or is it like a replay, like the stone tape theory?
He's real. There's nothing bad here, there's nothing horrible that can harm you. He seems to be the boss. He's the person in charge, and you have to remember that time period, late 1700s, men were men, women were, if you were lucky, they might have had a say, but they didn't own property. Once you were married, all your property went to your husband.
Right.
So he is a proper old man's man, and he doesn't like strong women. It took me many years for us to get on. As if I can get on with someone I can't see.
So do you think, will he make himself known tonight during the investigations, maybe?
Depends. Depends if he likes you or not. He fascinates me, and I remember when we were filming for a TV show and I mentioned about Mr. Ching's worm lozenges, he didn't like that, because we had the presenter under the Estes method, and I made sure that he had my headphones, which were noise cancelling, so he couldn't hear what I was saying, and he kept saying shh every time I spoke about this Mr. Ching's worm lozenges and the effect it had on James Broad.
So this area is now obviously a museum, and it's not open yet?
Just been renovated, hopefully it'll be open by the end of February 2023.
Right.
We've gone back to the original smuggling historical record. So Jane, who's been in charge of this, has done a fabulous renovation, and we are in the process, myself and Q Studios, of doing a new video for the stable block, and a documentary, and a paranormal documentary.
So why is stuff happening here if it's all very new? What did it used to be before it became a museum?
Well, this most likely was the barn to
Right.
go with the original dwelling house that was built around about 1760.
Yeah.
And this floor didn't go in till around about 1971.
Right, okay.
So in the 1950s, 1959, this was a tea room for the coaches.
Okay.
So I interviewed a lady called Dawn, and she took me on the tour of the inn and showing me where this stairs was there, that wasn't there, and it was fascinating to see how it looked through her eyes going back before the renovations.
And I've heard an amazing story, well, several stories, and looking at the history of the place, about horse and carriages going by in the night. Can you show me this area? It's out in the courtyard?
Yes, well, there's cobbles now, but
Yeah.
they didn't come up to the 1950s. There would have been gravel and dirt. Now, interestingly, there's been no reports of a cart or a carriage for quite a few years.
Right.
But we have had reports lately of dragging outside, and when people go and look, there's no one there. Especially from room 34 down in the new block.
Can we have a look at this area?
Of course we can.
Let's go. Thank you.
Well, the best evidence, for me, it's all about the debunking first. So the phone footage from a few years ago, you'll find it on the Jamaican Paranormal Team YouTube channel. That was recorded by the CCTV. And, you know, same with all the other things, it's really hard for us to put anything out. And we did sit on it for 3 months because we had to go through the debunking. Could the phone just be perched and not clicked on the stand, etc.? But we couldn't find an answer. Interestingly, just before the phone comes shooting off from the hook, April, who was the barmaid there, heard the bar door open, and it was a Sunday night and there was no one present. So that freaked her out, and then when the phone thing happened, that freaked her out even more, the poor thing.
So this is the area we tend to do the Estes method. So we use the spirit box. We tend to have one of our guests sat in this chair here, where they have the blindfold and the noise cancelling headphones on. Some guests like to know the history before they come in. Some don't like to know anything. So we always check that with our guests first. We do have out on the bed some historical knowledge of things that have actually happened in this room. But what tends to happen, even with or without that knowledge, what seems to happen coming through the spirit box is we get the get out. People have heard a baby crying. And often it seems when I've re-entered the room, if I've gone off, set some other guests up in a room and come back in, it's almost like they don't seem to like me in here. I tend to get told to leave. And we've had the name Mary come through. We've had that come through tonight as well. And Mary is a character who is associated with this inn. So it's quite fascinating.
The gift shop. The children used to throw the books around, giggle and pull the young girls' ponytails. To my right is the ladies' toilets, and I have a report from 1999 of a woman and her daughter coming out of the toilet, and the daughter says, "Mummy, is the little boy going to be there when I come back?" So the little boy is in there, and as we walk down again towards the men's toilets, a few years ago a gentleman was walking down here. He heard a tremendous argument between two men from the gents' toilets. As he opened the door, it stopped. There was no one in there.
He was on security back in '93 in a remote area, one building. Took over from a day relief guard, and he showed me around the building, checked all the doors, windows, made sure everything was secure. And he went out, shut the barrier down, locked the doors, and off he went. Throughout the evening he'd do regular patrols, and it's about 1:30 in the morning. I'd gone for a toilet break, so I'm sort of in the room for a little while, and the door slammed. The ceiling tiles, with the pressure of the door slamming, lifted. And I'm like, oh Christ, someone's in here. So I sorted myself out and basically running around this building, checking everything. And it was when I went towards reception, there was the last corridor I had to check, and one of the doors was wide open. Now, the lights were on in the corridor, but there was no lights on in the room. So I was able to see, using reflection from the glass, that no one was in the room. As I've gone to go in there, the door's bang, straight in my face. Now, it was on a closer. It was a fire door. And if you've ever tried pulling one of these doors shut, you know there's a lot of resistance in it. It just shuts slowly. One, the door was wide open. Don't know why. And secondly, it slammed in my face. I shit myself. I went back to reception and stayed there for the rest of the night. That's the only one that I've not been able to rationalise.
What experiences have you had at the Jamaica Inn?
Okay, so I've had where I've walked down the new block and I thought somebody was walking behind me. I could hear footprints as clear as anything on the carpet, and when I turned around there was nobody there. So that sort of like freaked me out. That was my first real thing that I ever experienced. I was stood in an area where I could hear people talking in the bar, and there was nothing. There was people sat down talking in the bar, but it sounded like they were right over my shoulder. And when I thought perhaps it was people outside by the window, but then when they started laughing, I couldn't hear them. But I could hear two voices, like a conversation going on over my shoulder, and that it just didn't feel right. My stomach was like, "Hey, what's this?" And I moved away. I did a thing a few weeks ago where I wore the ears so I couldn't hear what was being said, and Corinne was saying things, asking the spirits to sort of touch my neck or my hair, and actually it was happening, and I could feel somebody just tugging the corner of or the behind on my ponytail and things like that. I've had my hand touched, so it's like little things like that, but it's yeah, but I'm always nervous, I'm always waiting for it, so it's probably a little bit like, oh, okay. And then when it happens, I'm not ready.
So, during the Second World War, when we had over 8,000 US troops here, just before the D-Day landings, recently, the last 5 years, we've had reports of a US airman. Now, about 3 years ago, a 16-year-old girl was stood where you were, and this originally was a walkway to Brown Willie Hill. And the girl was stood here. She saw this door open and a man in full airman's uniform walk into the bar. She went outside to where her mother was and said, "I've just seen a man dressed in what looks like the bomber jacket, etc. But he made no sound on the flagstone floor." So her mother went into reception, said, "Have you got anyone dressed up in Second World War uniform?" Reception went out, had a look, no one. So who is this airman? He's been reported about 3 or 4 times. So does that mean that some ghosts disappear and others take their place? Who knows?
So is this a guest book?
Yes, this is the Jamaica Inn guest book. Lots and lots of names. It started in 2011, this particular book. We've got people from all around the world, and they also write down any experiences that they experience when they're in the hotel.
So do you get this often from guests that are actually leaving and giving feedback to what they've experienced in these rooms?
Yes, they do. And they'll also contact Facebook social media pages to say what they've experienced.
Right. Have you had people leave in the middle of the night before?
Yep, we had a chap that experienced something in one of the rooms upstairs, and it frightened him so much he then slept in his car all night and refused to come back into the inn.
Wow.
So one of the nights I was lucky enough to stay here on my own in my favourite room, room 3. I was sleeping on this side of the bed, and bear in mind that the investigation probably finished about 3 in the morning. I'd settled in, it was probably gone 4 o'clock in the morning, been asleep, and something woke me up, and I just felt like I wasn't alone, and I could hear footsteps walking along the side of the bed like this, quite slowly, and they seemed to come to a stop just here. So from where I was in the bed, I thought, right, Jem, you're an investigator, you need to be brave. Look up and just check whatever that is. So I looked up, there was absolutely nothing here at all. But I knew what I had heard. You know, no one should have been walking around at that time. The motion sensor lights on the corridor hadn't gone on, so it wasn't anybody walking along the corridors out here, because the light would have come on and I would have seen the ambient light around the door, and it wasn't there. So that was odd. But one of the stories is that people have seen a young lad of about 13 to 14 stood here in a flat sort of cap, sort of brown clothing, stood here. One of the names that has been given for this child is Tommy, but again, we're not 100% sure who this is. but some other guests have reported using that name and having a connection, and some responses. I called out and it was actually flat, and I was so tired I just went straight back to sleep. The other phenomena that we get here, which for me personally is the most common, is that out on the corridor, I'll just show you, we have motion sensor lights. The light is on, so obviously somebody has been walking out there at the moment. After a few seconds, if there's no movement out there, that light will go off. But what's quite common, and I've now experienced in all 4 bedrooms on the haunted floor, is that I will be in a ring. I may hear or I may not hear any movement, but what I'll notice is that light around the door, and if you look at the bottom of the door, I've seen it again in all 4 rooms now, the shadow of feet, 2 feet under the door. When I've run, and I do, because I'm desperate to see, I run to the door, open the door, and there's nobody there. And it's just infuriating, because you think, what do they want? What's their purpose? You know, and there's a definite shadow there of 2 feet. So it's unexplainable. And we have checked CCTV, and there's nothing there. So it's a mystery, an absolute mystery, but it's awesome.
Just because they've seen something, it doesn't mean it's a ghost. Just, you know, it's still scientifically, like I've said, unproven.
I must admit, but some of the stuff that I experienced myself, you know, especially when we went into the night vision, was quite interesting, I must admit.
Yeah,
But you know, I'm not saying it was spirit, but at the time when you're hyped up and in the moment, it certainly feels like something's
but
going
that's
on.
another part of it. You're hyped up, you're in the moment, you've got this expectation that you want something to happen, and when it does, you're rather than taking a step back. Okay, I've just experienced this, why? You know, you've got to ask questions. Why? What was it? Why have I experienced it?
There is an eerie silence from them all as the comforting daylight dissolves to darkness across the land. Adam begins to set up his ghost hunting equipment.
So I've got my EMF meter. Now everyone who's into paranormal stuff will know what an EMF meter is, so I don't need to explain that. But a little bit of text on the screen will explain to those who don't know. So I'm not getting any activity at all at the moment with it, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. We've got some dowsing rods. Again, most people will know how to use these as well. So originally famous with water diviners who would use it to find water. I'm not too sure about these. I think a lot of it is a trick of the mind, and very, very small vibrations and twitches in your own body without you realising you're doing it will actually make them move. I think they're too sensitive, so I don't think I want to use these tonight. Right, so let's do a little check. So no activity at all. One thing to remember is when you use an EMF meter is not to actually have a mobile phone near you, because the signal from text, from updates, will actually interfere with the reader. So normally you'd get there's electrics, but no, we're not getting anything at all, so I'm happy. I think it's time to switch out the lights and see what we get. We're now in night vision in room 3 at the Jamaica Inn. I'm here with Helen, my partner. She sat on the 4-poster bed and she has an EMF meter as well as me. We can hear some interference from the pub which is open below us, so we need to ignore that. So a previous landlord who is said to haunt the place is Thomas. Thomas, are you here? Would you like to make a noise and make yourself known? So Helen, you're sat on an old chair.
That's correct.
I wonder if this is one of the mirrors that the paperwork talk about, when Oh,
handprints.
I'm seeing some weird stuff.
Are you?
Hmm.
What are you seeing?
It's probably dust, but what some people would call orbs. Just some strange lights went past.
Nothing's on my EMF.
Right into the mirror. Can you do that again? Is someone here with us? Is there a spirit with us? Thomas?
Mary?
As you can see, nothing from the EMF.
No. My heart does feel a bit fluttery in this room.
Does it?
Mm.
What,
When
since
I
you
first
walked in?
When I first walked in.
But could that be the anticipation of
Yeah,
knowing you're
it
walking
could
into
be.
a allegedly haunted location?
It could be. It doesn't, it's not a constant flutter, but it just comes here and there.
Well, I don't think Mary wants to make herself known. Can you knock on the wall, Mary? We are now in room 4. Nothing really happened in the last room. So we're going to go to night vision. I am starting to think, because of the acoustics of the building and a lot of other guests moving around, that maybe they're imagining things and they're hearing things that they're maybe believing are ghosts and spirits, but who knows, we might actually have something happen tonight. We've just had a motion sensor in room 4 go off. Now I was nowhere near that, and I tested that when I come into the room, and you have to go right up next to it, and yet seconds ago, oh my gosh, I feel really cold.
This is like literally moving like mad just now.
So the pendulum is moving, is it?
Yeah. Look.
Yeah. Right, can you...
That's since you said about the motion sensor.
Yeah, if you can turn it off a second, the light. I'm just going to see. Is there a spirit in the room with us, please? Can you make that light come on again? Are you by the wardrobe? See, that was really interesting. For that to go off and be nowhere near it. They're motion activated. The only way you can set that off is by swishing your hand or body over the sensor.
That's got to be that close.
Yeah.
But then the pendulum started going a bit mad as well. Oh.
Yeah, so you have to get right in the doorway for it to go off.
Yeah.
So,
You were sat there, weren't you?
yeah. Would you like us to leave? How are you going to get us to leave?
So 2018, a couple were moving down to Cornwall. They decided to come down the night before and stay here at the Jamaica Inn. They had just finished their meal. It's about 9:15 at night. They were the only couple apart from a couple more. And she saw a serving girl who she thought was dressed in period costume. She had a mauve dress on, a mop cap and a dirty apron. But the clothing was probably sort of mid-1800s. And she came towards this lady carrying a tray. So the lady picked her glass up. She held it out to give to the girl, thinking it was, just someone dressed up in costume. And the figure promptly disappeared in front of her. So she said she's still holding the glass out. She looked at her husband and said, "I think I've just seen a ghost."
So do you think the fabric of buildings hold the energy in sometimes, like the stone tape theory?
But it's just a theory. There's no scientific proof to say that it does. And that's it. And that's the way you've got to be, really. If science is saying no, it's not possible, how do we go around that?
Do you not want my lights there.
You do.
If you want the lights to stay in the room,
Flash again.
flash again. Whoa, whoa.
Whoa!
I'm going to take it then. No, you don't want me to take it.
Oh, this.
Okay, I won't take it. I'm going to leave it there for you. But I need to take mine, but I'll swap it for another one.
So in room 4 there were some motion sensors that went off, and there was also a cat ball in there, and every time we were talking about evil, negative spirits, the actual cat ball would start flashing. And when we said that we will move to me. What was that noise?
So another member of staff, it was past closing time, walked down to the end of this bar, and as he looked to his right, he saw one of the doors open on its own and heavy footsteps walk along the counter, and there was no one there. So we're in the main bar of the Jamaica Inn, and this seems to be the hub for poltergeist activity. So over the years, glasses have fallen off the shelves and smashed, jugs have moved along the bar and fallen and smashed into pieces. Staff complain that they do a drink and then suddenly it just tips all over them. And tankers, some of these tankers a few years ago were hung along the bar, and one night we came in and just one was swinging wildly on its own. It was witnessed by about 30 people.
You know, I spent the night at the Jamaica Inn, and I must admit, some of the stuff I witnessed, I can't explain. What do you think people are seeing there? Why are so many people having these experiences at the Jamaica Inn?
We don't know. That's an honest opinion. I don't know.
Is it like you said earlier, that people are creating the image, the anticipation? You know, if you're going on an advertised ghost hunt where you hear the history of the building, I mean, the building is in the middle of the moors, you've got the misty rain.
Yeah.
It creates stuff in your brain, doesn't it?
It creates an atmosphere, certainly. Mm. But it also depends on which side of the fence you're on. You know, what you're prepared to believe. Are you going to take the slightest little thing as being paranormal, or are you going to rationalise what you're experiencing, rather than going, oh, it's a ghost, or something happened, it's got to be paranormal. It's just not, you know, there's got to be a balance, hasn't there?
But I spoke to a lot of witnesses, and they've all got different backgrounds, they've all got potentially different beliefs, and they were all, to me anyway, they were all very genuine, and they were very convinced by what they had witnessed at the Jamaica Inn.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm in no doubt that people experience, I've experienced myself. But the big question is, why? Why do we experience these things? You know, if science hasn't proven the existence of ghosts or spirit, then there's got to be some logical explanation for it. Is it our minds? Is it our thought processes? Our beliefs? What do you think?